next speaker brings practical experience as an AI technologist and founder of Johnny 5 AI Limited, a Hong Kong-based AI product company that collaborates with academia to develop AI IoT applications for research and development in areas of social welfare in healthcare communities. To talk about global AI solutions for positive impact in society, in business, please welcome Mr. Jesse Smith. Welcome, Jesse.
Thank you all for that wonderful introduction. Much appreciated. And Oliver, for your amazing presentation on some of the things that are happening in the future. All right. Well, yeah, thank you very much, El. That was a great introduction. Yeah, as you said, I'm the president of AI for Good Asia, a not-for-profit organization. And what we're trying to do is enable other organizations and governments to implement AI projects that will improve society and fight inequality within the region. And so today I've been asked to talk about some positive practical applications. So if Oliver talked about the future potential, and we heard some really great things about what's possible in terms of quantum computing, I guess today I'm going to talk about what's practical and what actually can be done from your communities right now, wherever you are. So I'm going to talk about three things. I'm going to talk about the impact of AI on business and society, primarily talk about why we are going to see such a huge impact. So what is it about AI that's special compared to other technological advances? And then I'm going to show you a few case studies. I have many case studies to show you, but I've pared it down in the essence of time to 6 practical examples of how AI right now is being implemented around the world, and how perhaps you could think about these technologies and how they could be implemented in your community. So this is achievable implementation. So, you know, I talk a lot about risks and I talk a lot about ethics in my talks, but today it's going to be a very positive talk about the future. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about, you know, some of the issues and problems. They are, you know, according to Business Insider article, the millennials anyways said that, you know, they picked the top 10 different problems that were most on their minds, and climate change, war, large-scale conflict, and inequality were the top 3 at 48, 38, and 30%. And we're seeing that, you know, with all of these problems, from divisive technologies to the politicization and religious conflicts, these are some of the things that people are fearing right now around the world. And we have to ask ourselves, you know, what role is AI going to play in some of these? Obviously, we've seen AI play a role in education, and we can see, you know, some examples in climate change. But I think for the most part, a lot of people are quite scared that AI will be implemented perhaps not for the benefit of humanity, but perhaps for the harm. So it's important for us to look at why AI is going to make such an impact. Why are people so concerned about AI and how it's going to be implemented in our societies? So let's take a look at one of the first things that I say. It's the foundation factor. So AI, first of all, it is a general purpose technology, which is why it's going to be so ubiquitous and going to make such a huge impact. And what does that mean? That means it's a fundamental technology, kind of like the steam engine was, or electricity, or mechanization, or automation, or even the automobile, which Oliver mentioned earlier. Certainly the internet, and also the computer itself, and medicine. So AI is one of those fundamental technologies that can really make a big difference, because it's going to affect so many aspects of our society, like these technologies or general purpose technologies that came before it. The second factor that is very important to consider is the spending factor. Huge amounts of money right now are going to be put into AI. At this current stage, we're seeing about $27.3 billion being put into the market at this moment. But if you predict that to 2027, we're going to see that number grow by 10 times, or 33% year-on-year growth. And according to Fortune Business Insights, this is an estimation that it will be worth $266 billion by 2027. So we're talking about a huge amount of money that's going to go into the AI development and AI market. For an example of how big that is, that's about the size of how much China's military spending is today. And 27 is about how much Brazil spends on military today. So we're talking about huge amounts of money. In terms of business spending, enterprise spending, which is an important factor, we're going to see about $110 billion in terms of investment from businesses in 2024. And a particular sector that you may be familiar with that is spending an enormous amount of money is the retail sector. And we did a conference on this earlier, but that's going to be at $15.3 billion. So we can see that an enormous amount of money is being spent on AI development. And also we're seeing that as a general purpose technology, it's going to have a huge effect. But what exactly are we talking about when we say AI? And many of you will already know this, but just to be clear, so we're on the same page, what we're talking about in terms of artificial intelligence is a basket of technologies, but primarily we're focused on machine learning and a subset of machine learning, which is called deep learning. And it's important for me to mention that because a lot of people think of AI as many different things. We just heard about all the wonderful things that AI can do and potentially do. But in terms of practical applications, it's important to know what we're talking about. AI as an evolution of software, AI as a way to do specific tasks, which is kind of what Oliver was saying before in terms of strong and weak. For today's presentation, we're going to look at it in terms of narrow and general. So narrow AI is, like Oliver said, a specific tool. So it's a very purpose-built type of artificial intelligence. This is what we're talking about today. When you want to talk about general artificial intelligence, we're talking about that in the future. And there's some debate about when that will actually be available or how long it will take. And certainly the advances in computer technology and things will be able to give us some realization of that. But for our purposes, we are not talking about that because in terms of business application, we are always, at least today, always talking about narrow AI. And this is what we wanted to focus on in terms of your communities. So what are the things that you can apply now, today, given the technologies that we have? And so there are key applications in AI technology in terms of what they can do. So we're seeing primarily that they can do things related to computer vision. So that is basically how the computer sees. And these are things like medical diagnosis or facial recognition and analysis. We're seeing things in terms of how natural language processing, so how they hear and speak. And these are things like classification and routing of emails, going through parsing text, and also, as you see in your phones, the application of Siri, and also in your homes, Alexa. So the next one is the ability to make a decision or perform some sort of prediction or support. And this is thinking. So this is the thinking. This is the neural network aspect that we talk about when we're talking about the basket of technologies in terms of what AI can do. And then the last one is the biomechanics and robotics. So this is, the AI that is put into the robotics that will help them move, such as picking up a box on an assembly line or moving around, boxes and items in a warehouse. So these are some of the applications today. And where are we actually using these technologies? Where are they now? Well, you already have AI all around you. So it's important to realize that there are common uses right now today that we all live with, and it's funny how once a technology becomes ubiquitous, we kind of forget what it was. So here are some examples of AI that actually, we don't even think about as AI anymore. The prediction, search engine for Google, for example, that's, probably one of the most, widespread first uses of artificial intelligence. And, Facebook, for example, and how they can keep you engaged by understanding your behavior and then, serving up videos and ads that you are more likely to be interested in, or the prediction, recommenders in Amazon, for example, they get your, those product recommendations just right. Or the ride-hailing app, Uber, and how, when you hail, an app, they find the right and match you with the right driver in the area next to you. And this is all examples of AI, but we don't even think of them as AI. And so these are the types of things that we're seeing in terms of the AI implementation today. There are many examples. I won't get into all of them, but these are some real, some future, current real-life examples that are being implemented. And there are things that you all sort of know that are taking place, such as the cute enhancements of your face and for your video calls, or, the prediction of text, or checking for plagiarism if you're at school, or, recommending products, as we just talked about, or filtering your spam. So we're seeing a lot of narrow applications for AI today. And I just wanted to talk about those to separate, the hype from the practical. But what we're seeing here is largely commercialization of AI, narrow AI in certain areas. And these are neat, these are interesting. But today I would like to talk more about what we can really do with AI today to make the world a better place. So where do we go from here? Well, we need to ask ourselves some questions. We have to ask ourselves, what are our priorities? And what do we want from these technologies? Where do we want to go? And I usually talk a lot about ethics and the risks associated with these technologies and implementing them in the wrong way. But today I'm going to try and focus on the positive aspects. And that's really important because these technologies have an enormous power to do good, but also an enormous power to do harm. And so I think it comes down to a fundamental decision, especially because of all the money that's going in and all the great potential of artificial intelligence. We need to make a decision on what kind of world do we want to live in? How do we want these technologies to be implemented in our communities and in our societies? And that involves ethics, the values that we hold dear, and how do we implement those with frameworks in the technologies that we are building. And there are many ways that we can do that today. And it's about accountability. If the artificial intelligence today is going into commercialization, retail, and prediction of behavior, who is accountable for the positive aspects of AI? Who's actually going to be implementing these? And there's some thought around, is it the responsibility of the companies that benefit from these efficiencies created by artificial intelligence? Do they have some sort of ethical or moral responsibility to give back to the communities? So what we do at AI for Good is we try and find the right partners to implement the right projects so we can use these technologies for good. But there are people and companies that share that vision. For example, we're seeing large companies like Microsoft, who says, Brad Smith, and I quote, "We're finding that AI indeed has the potential to help solve some of the world's most pressing problems." And this is encouraging because at AI for Good, we are partnering. We are in the process of partnering with large technology firms and allowing them to make positive strides and impacts in the communities that we serve, such as Asia and here in Vietnam. So in terms of what we do, just quickly, we provide value for people through practical AI projects on a community level. For organizations, we provide market access. Maybe perhaps they can't get access to the region here. Research and development opportunities to try out artificial intelligence projects, and social responsibility achievements that they can present to their shareholders. On the government level, we provide support, connections for them to find the right partners, the right technology partners to implement AI solutions and actually solve some of those societal concerns that they are doing. And then finally, we give them scale-up recommendations so they can continue to take these technologies and implement them. So let's look at a few case studies. And as I said, we are partnering in the process of partnering with Microsoft and also Crayon Group. So the examples I'm going to show you today are examples from both Microsoft and Crayon. And if I had more time, I would show you a lot more. But let's look at some practical examples and some interesting innovations that are making an impact in business and society today. So the first one is a acoustic IoT sensor that tracks and monitors endangered species, and particularly elephants, in the Republic of Congo. And the group that's doing this is called Conservation Metrics. And they are trying to solve the problem of poaching and of elephants and the endangered nature that they face through illegal logging and other means where they are being taken from us. So, and there's an interesting thing, despite their actual size, they're very difficult to find. So this solution provides a very interesting technology, which is acoustic IoT sensors. So it's sound. So it uses sound to track and find these elephants, and that information is then fed into deep learning algorithms using a Zero platform. And it can detect events and interest, and it can use this data then to help the elephants know, or the scientists know, where the elephants are, and they can know when they are being threatened or even being killed. So in that way, tracking and monitoring can help improve their safety and increase their numbers. So that's one case study. Another one is in also a Microsoft case study it's called REEZE Technologies. And this is very interesting. This is a problem of poor air pollution in cities. And depending on where you are, you may be facing this problem as well. And so in order to solve this, they've implemented a sensor-based collection in real time. And what it does is it takes the data and then it calibrates that data by removing the external factors like humidity, temperature, or fluctuations, or sensor drift, these types of things. By removing that data, it gets more accurate measurement of where there is air pollution. And with that data and that recommendation, we can then find out, where the biggest impact will be made in terms of making adjustments to factories or traffic, or implementing different solutions within the city. Another example is called cloud ergonomics, and this uses hyperspectral imaging. And what this really does is allows for the accurate measurement of soil secretion. Now, if you're familiar with climate change problems, or you've watched recent documentaries on the power of soil to actually secrete carbon emissions and hold that carbon within the soil, is pretty remarkable. And so one of the things that this project tries to do is tries to track and calculate how much carbon is actually being sequestered into the soil. And this is done in a very interesting way through a camera, a highly sensitive spectral imaging camera that's on an aircraft that then can collect the data at 300 times more accurate and per pixel than a satellite. So what that does, and that it gets fed into, again, an edge computer and then onto the Azure platform, and it converts this raw data into insight. And that's what we want to try and do with machine learning and AI. And that with that data, we can find out exactly real-time monitoring of how much carbon is being sequestered into the soil. And what makes this project particularly exciting is the next level to that. So in terms of incentives, then you can create carbon farming credits. So if the farm then sequesters this much carbon and you can track and measure that, then they can get a subsidy or a credit, then that can be traded. So it's an interesting economic incentive for farmers to adopt this type of technology that then can, combat climate change. Okay, so those are some examples from just a few. Like I said, I have many more from Microsoft. And now I'd like to talk a little bit more about some of the examples that Crayon Group is using. So the first one is a fall prevention study. So this is using, I like this one because it's using low-tech devices such as Kinect. Now, if you play video games, you will know that from your Xbox, and it's the tracking device that allows you to interact with your video games. And in this case, we use this to track actually the movements of patients, and this can be a big deal in terms of preventing falls or fall reduction. And you know, over 10,000 people get injured from this. A year in terms of hospitals, and a lot of them are elderly, and that was just in one hospital. And so privacy concerns are an issue too, because they don't want to be, you don't want to stick cameras in hospitals, of course. So the Kinect is a nice, elegant, and cost-effective solution because it's able to alert doctors to the changes in behavior before they happen. And with an IoT device, a nurse can get a notice very quickly of what's going to be taking place and what prevention. And within 5 seconds, if she doesn't answer, it goes to another next closest nurse. And if she doesn't answer, then it goes to a department-wide alert. Now, what this does, it gives very quick, real-time information to doctors about to prevent and reduce falls and enable staff to focus on other things, because currently the random checks don't really let you know, before it happens. It's too late. So this is a nice example of using machine learning and IoT in a hospital, and it's a low-cost solution using the Kinect as well. So next, I'd like to talk a little bit about something that's on probably a lot of your minds, privacy. And we hear this a lot when we're talking about AI, in particular in computer vision and facial recognition. So here is a simple example that allows to create anonymous data that then protects the privacy of the people that are being captured, but still allows for businesses and governments to benefit from that data and that media. So this is important because there are strict laws being implemented, such as GDPR in Europe, and it allows for the ability to capture this. But the solution here is it will be have anonymity, because it will be masked, it will be blurred, it will not show any sensitive data. So this is an interesting study because it can then capture this data that is so valuable for smart cities and making predictions of traffic and all kinds of benefits for governments and also for businesses, but it does it in a way that doesn't infringe on citizens' privacy. Okay, and lastly, I want to talk about something a little different. Now, this is a problem that some of you may have been aware of, and I was asked to say a few words about this. So, deep fakes, if you don't know, is a concern that people have, and this is the idea, the practice of using artificial intelligence to then mimic or do face swap so that videos are actually not of people that you may think are giving this speech, but they're really not. And this is using a general adversarial network to do this. And these are done in a way that people can be really misleading because they're getting better and better. So one of the things that is being done, and there's two different research groups and initiatives doing this. One is out of Berkeley and the other is out of Cornell. And they're actually trying to counter the deepfakes with their own AI algorithms. So this is using AI to detect the face swaps by looking at eye blinking. That's one that's being done out of Berkeley. And another one out of Cornell is using the collection of head gestures and different unique quirks that, say, a person would have. And this can be done when you have a large data source from that individual. And so here's an example of how AI is combating AI. we'll see how that plays out. Who can stay ahead of each other because as one algorithm gets better, the other one will need to keep up. So those are just a few of the case studies that are available right now. Like I said, I have many more from Microsoft and Crayon in terms of implementable solutions. Also, as a practitioner, I was able to implement my own solutions in a hospital in terms of a intelligent pill bottle. So there are many aspects to AI technology that can be implemented today. And if you and your communities want to implement or try some of these to solve some of the problems that you're facing, there are a few key steps to start that. And I'll just go over a few of those now. So the first one is identify the problem that you're facing. So, what is the area that you think that AI can play a role? And you'd be surprised. There's some projects that you wouldn't think AI can play a role, but they can, and not all of them are huge, high-budget projects. So first is identify the problem, whether it be a business problem, community problem, establish the right partners. So we try to work with technology partners that are experienced, that also want to make a social impact, and then we want to make sure that you have the right funding in place for these projects. And then you need to prepare your data strategy. It's very important to assess the quality of data. If you don't have data, you have to find a way to collect the data and make sure that it is cleansed and able to be used with the machine learning algorithms. And then you find the right cloud platforms, and you go through a process of labeling and tagging that. Next is the execution. So this is when you actually develop the model. So we work with the partners like Crayon to come in and help you develop the model. Their data scientists would help make sure that the right models are being developed, and they conduct experiments and finalize a proof of value prototype. And that's the goal. And then once you have that, then you can promote these outcomes, share your project in a report, and then we'd also recommend ways to scale up that initial technology. So that's some of the key project steps that we would go through. So as a company or as an individual, but particularly a business, why would you want to implement an AI for Good project? Well, we see 4 key major benefits to doing an AI for Good project within Asia. One is market entry. It's difficult to and costly to enter markets. So we have a go-to-market strategy in the Asia region, which will help give governments and work with governments and institutions that can be invaluable. Next is R&D. R&D projects are costly for businesses, as some of you will be no doubt familiar with. And this is a low-risk way for an organization to develop new technologies and co-develop IP. Then marketing. This is a great way to gain exposure and promote successful use cases. So this is an excellent way to share, partly to share your CSR initiatives. Your investor relations will benefit from this, but it's also a practical technology implementation, which is a win and great for shareholder value. So you have to ask yourself, if you want to get into Asia, what are you doing in Asia? And what is the R&D initiatives or your CSR initiatives? And AI for Good is a not-for-profit organization that is here that can help you facilitate that. So just as a final message, I would like to do a call to action. I'd like to say, in your communities, tell us your problems. No problem's too small. Tell us about what's going on. You can go to our website at aiforgood.asia. We will try and match the project with a technology partner, like, for example, Microsoft or Crayon Group. And, we will also offer collaborative opportunities. If you want to just get involved, please contact us. For governments, again, problem identification. Tell us what societal problems you're working on, and we'll try and provide some strategy support. And, experts, if you need experts for a consultation, we can try and find someone to come and make a presentation in the area that you think is best. And lastly, the organizations, think about sponsoring a regional project. Contact us if you want to do a project in Asia, and we'll provide some technology support and strategy And we also have research collaborations that we are working on. So in terms of today, I wanted to give you some positive, concrete, practical examples of how AI is being implemented for a positive impact in business and society. So I hope that you are a little bit inspired, and please, reach out to us. We are not-for-profit, happy to, hear your thoughts and help you get involved. So thank you.